You know the name Doug Poppa?
Yes, I do. God bless Doug Poppa, an honest cop.
I was elated, of course, but then as he testified, I was somewhat concerned for him, because I knew that they were probably going to crucify that man.
The top cop who put his badge on the line for justice.
One man who confronted truth and consequences.
Welcome to Truth and Consequences with Doug Poppa, episode 48 for Wednesday, May 5th, 2021. On Tuesday evening, May 4th, I interviewed Connie Land, the mother of Sydney Land, one of the victims in the still unsolved 2016 Las Vegas Land Kauffman Double Homicide. Connie Land filed a complaint against Las Vegas Justice Court Judge Melanie Andress-Tobiasson in December 2018 with the Nevada Commission on Judicial Discipline. As I reported in previous episodes, Judge Andress-Tobiasson, in agreement with the Nevada Commission on Judicial Discipline, will resign from the bench on May 7th in lieu of facing charges at a public judicial commission hearing that was to commence on May 17th. Tobiasson has also agreed to the stipulation that she can never be a judge in the state of Nevada ever again. This is an admission of guilt, in my opinion, specifically since this agreement was agreed upon just shy of 2 weeks prior to Tobiasson's public hearing, where she would have had the opportunity to defend herself against the commission's charges. Now, my interview with Connie Land. How are you doing tonight, Connie?
I'm fine, thanks, Doug. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I guess last month, April, was 4.5 years mark where the murder of your daughter and Nehemiah Kauffman occurred, which makes it a 4.5-year unsolved double murder case. I know it's a stupid question, but it's the question I got to ask is, how does that make you feel?
It makes me sick. It's so frustrating. And, you know, it's just a never-ending fight. Right.
Judge Tobiasson, as you know, because you were interviewed yesterday by, I think, Channel 13 Action News out here, she tendered her resignation. It's going to be effective May 7th, in lieu of her facing charges at a public hearing, which was scheduled for just shy of 2 weeks from now. Judge Tobiasson made a lot of comments, both to you and myself in a May 2018 email about the criminal investigation conducted by the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department relating to your daughter's death and Nehemiah Kauffman's death, the double murder. She said that, in essence, the police department is covering up aspects of the murder. They probably destroyed evidence, and she has evidence. According to her, the police don't know what evidence she has that of the cover-up. How does that make you feel, as the mother of a murdered woman, who the case is unsolved 4.5 years later, and you've had this judge who made these comments going back to me, 2018, and the comments she made to you when she befriended you in 2017. How do you feel about this whole thing, about her tendering the resignation in lieu of facing charges? What's on your mind right now? How do you feel?
I don't even know how to put them into words because it's so frustrating. She is absolutely the most repulsive person. Who plays these games? Who does something like this? She acted like such a victim, spewing that she was innocent and she was just an innocent mother trying to protect her child. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? The games that she played with me, telling me that everything you just said, they destroyed evidence. They weren't going to solve the case. She has the evidence, but they don't know what she has. Are you kidding? If you really wanted to help us, then you would have told me what that evidence was, but she never did, Doug. She never did. So what her motives are, I still to this day don't know. And it's infuriating to me. The commission, this was a failure for the commission. If they think that this was a big win for them, it wasn't. It wasn't. All this sent was a clear message to the judicial community that they can go and do whatever they want. They can do cover-ups. They can lie. They can break the law. They can manipulate. They can intimidate. And the commission is not going to push it all the way to a hearing. They're going to cut a deal. Judges are going to get their pension. They're going to keep all of their benefits. And that's how they deal with corruption and judicial misconduct in Clark County. Go figure. I can't even begin to tell you how upset it is. But you know me, Doug. I am so far done from this. This is a very tiny sliver of everything I'm going to do to anybody that was involved in this case. It just makes me so angry.
Let me get back to the good points, what you just said. But this was, and she still is a sitting judge until May 7th of this year. This was a sitting judge who went on the record with me, an investigative journalist, at the time my stories were being published by the Baltimore Post-Examiner. I think I did just almost 30 relating to Judge Tobiasson and the unsolved murder of your daughter and Nehemiah Kauffman. She went on the record, and she said that there's no doubt. She said, plain as day, there was a cover-up in the murder investigation of your daughter and Nehemiah Kauffman. She said the police probably destroyed evidence of the case, but they don't know what evidence she has. To this day, and I think I said that before, she has yet to produce any of the evidence that she has or explain to you and the Kauffman family publicly as a sitting judge why she believes there's a cover-up in the homicide investigation, the two murders. In addition to that, as you know, and I reported on this extensively, both in the stories I wrote for the Baltimore Post-Examiner that are available online and in the almost 47 episodes of my podcast, Truth and Consequences with Doug Poppa. She also said that the wrong two people were murdered, that it was not supposed to be your daughter and Nehemiah Kauffman. It was meant to be her and her daughter because the police had outed her as a source of confidential information to her daughter Sarah's best friend, Allie, who's the daughter of another Las Vegas Metro police officer, and according to Judge Tobiasson, was a prostitute at the time of the murders working for Nehemiah Kauffman, one of the victims in the murder case that's unsolved with your daughter. How does all that make you feel? What's going through your head for all these years with all this stuff that I've been writing and talking about, and now she's escaping? The best way I can put it is accountability by not going to the public hearing where chances were, if the commission knew what they were doing, and I believe they're pretty smart, the prosecutors, where she was going to be asked these questions, why these statements were made and what evidence that she has. How does that make you feel?
There are no words, Doug. This slimy, sleazy, two-bit, wannabe judge, hero, whatever she calls herself, she is in no way, shape, or form a good person. She is not a good judge. She is not ethical. She is not a good person. She didn't want to help us solve this case. She doesn't want to solve this case. She is a flat-out liar. And she has gone to this poor victim mentality to the community, and the community's buying it. I don't get it. Well, she said it was her and her daughter that were supposed to be killed. She's never once explained to me why my daughter was shot point blank in the face and it was supposed to be her and her daughter. You don't make those accusations. You don't go on record and say something like that and then shut your mouth and run away like a coward like she is. She knew she was going to get raked over the coals in that hearing, and she is such a spineless, gutless person, a slithering, slimy, I don't even know what to call her, that she skated away and she thinks she's going to get away with that. You know what's so funny? She used to tell me, Connie, you better have the backbone to fight this fight. Oh, she has no idea who she's up against when she hit me. When she starts making accusations like this, she tells me the police have evidence. They're destroying evidence. I'm being followed. She was the target. My daughter. I buried my daughter. She got the bullet in the face. She's the one that had the slow death. And the judge doesn't have the balls to explain herself? How dare she? I will fight till my last breath to get that out of her.
You know, Connie, I feel so bad for you because, and your family, and the Kauffman family also, and so people understand this, that, you know, a lot of people say, well, you're always talking to, you know, Connie and the Land family, and you haven't reached. I said, let me explain something right now. For the past couple of years, I've reached out to the Kauffman family, several members of Nehemiah Kauffman's family, and never got a response from them. Which is their right. They don't have to talk to me. They don't have to talk to the news media. But I just want people to know that this is not one-sided. I can only address issues that you raise because you're the only one talking to me. And I wish the Kauffman family, they have an open mic anytime they want to say whatever they want about anything on my podcast. That's his mother. That's his brothers. That's his other family members, aunts and uncles. They have an open mic to say at any time, reach out to me, and you have an open mic to say whatever you want. It's on their mind, because no matter what Neo Kauffman was into, okay, he is dead, murdered, just like your daughter, shot in the head. He is a son. He's a brother. He's a nephew in the Kauffman family. And they have every right, as everybody else, to ask questions as to why this case is not solved. And I'm telling you, as a former criminal investigator, and I've been on this thing for over 2 years with you and everything that I've done, this was a case that should have been solved with less than 2 weeks, as far as I'm concerned. And I think it's such a tragic event for the families, for your family and the Kauffman family, that this case is not solved. And then on top of it, everything that Judge Tobiasson said that she's never answered for. You know, she's going to be off the bench in a couple of days. She's not going to be a judge. And, you know, if she has any decency, Judge Tobiasson, I'll address you right now. If you have any decency, any level of decency in your body, when you're off the bench, if what you told me during that interview is a fabrication, you made stuff up for dramatic reasons or whatever your reasons, your own agenda was. If you have nothing to back up what you said and you just made it up, you're going to be off the bench. Come out publicly and say, what I told Doug Poppa was a lie. It was a fabrication. I don't know if there was a cover-up. I don't have any evidence on the case. I mean, for the sake of the Land and Kauffman families, if you have any decency as a judge and a mother, do the right thing. That's all I'm asking. That's all the Land and the Kauffman families are asking. Do the right thing. Because her not going ahead, she had the opportunity in 2 weeks at a public hearing to expose all this evidence that she has publicly and vindicate herself from everything that's been going on and that's been said about her and things that I've said about her. And nothing I've ever said about Judge Tobiasson was a fabrication. It's all based on what she told me, her own voice, email messages between me and her, text messages that you turned over to me 2 years ago between you and her. And now she's taken the coward's way out and is using excuses. And you know what's so sickening about this, Connie, and is the fact that the spineless, gutless Las Vegas media, every single one of them, the print media and the television media, have never followed through with anything that I've done. Everything that I've exposed on my podcast. Court documents, text messages, emails, her own voice. Not once has any journalist, quote journalist, if you want to call them that out here, have called me up and said, we want to follow through with this. Let's go ahead and follow through with it. They haven't done it. Now, I don't want to get into this rant, okay, because it's upsetting to me. But there are law enforcement officers, both state, federal, and local, outside of Las Vegas, not cops in Las Vegas. Yes, I talked to a lot of cops in Las Vegas, current and retired over the years. Dozens and dozens and dozens of them ever since the massacre and even before the Las Vegas massacre. But I'm talking about law enforcement officers across this country, attorneys across the country, who send me these emails who've been following my work for years. This is what one said to me this morning, and I'm just going to call him as Officer Joe. He's never been a Las Vegas Metro police officer. He's a retired police officer from another state with 30 plus years of experience, a veteran police officer. And he's been following my stories here. This is what he said to me. Yeah, the local Las Vegas news finally picks up on it after she resigns. And their reporting downplayed what a true POS this judge is. It was your reporting that got this horrible person off the bench. Where was the local media when all this stuff was going down? They should have been all over this story from the start. So much for unbiased news in Las Vegas. You know, those are the comments, Connie, that I've been getting from attorneys and judges and just regular people that read my stuff for the past 2 or 3 years on this thing. Since I started the interview with the judge and wrote about it in the Baltimore Post-Examiner, now on the podcast, I get comments like, if this was in New York City, if this was in Los Angeles, this would be front page news. A judge accusing the police of being corrupt. A sitting judge saying that there's a cover-up in an unsolved double homicide. That the police probably destroyed evidence. A sitting judge is saying this. Not a porter at the courthouse, a sitting judge. A sitting judge is the one who made the comment on the record with me, an investigative journalist, in May 2018, that the wrong 2 people were murdered. It was meant to be her and her daughter. And the local news media fails and has failed to look into any of this and report on it. The only thing they do is go after the commission because of their bias and protect Judge Tobiasson. And why do I say that? And I think I said this in a podcast back. In December of 2019, Judge Tobiasson and another judge, Amy Cellini, on a totally separate matter, has nothing to do with the charges against Judge Tobiasson on the current charges that she will not face. They were under investigation for basically hostile work environment, unprofessional conduct. They were at a hearing before the Nevada Commission on Judicial Discipline. I covered this extensively. I wrote about it when I was writing for the Baltimore Post-Examiner, and I've talked about it again in my podcast. 2-day hearing in December of 2019. I sat there, and I covered it, and I wrote about it. Also in that hearing room was David Ferrara, a reporter for the Las Vegas Review-Journal. And this other woman, who I call her a blogger, Dana Gentry, who writes for this online outlet called the Nevada Current. They wrote stories at the conclusion, both of them, at that 2-day hearing in December. But you know what they filtered out and didn't report on? When Thomas Bradley, the prosecuting officer for the commission, brought the fact up to Judge Tobiasson, didn't you give an interview to the Baltimore Post-Examiner in 2018? Because she had made statements to them that she never threatened anybody. And then basically she admitted and said, yes, unfortunately so. I think that was her answer. And when they brought up the fact that she threatened Shane Valentine through his attorney, something she said to me on the record in May 2018, she said basically that my interview with her was not supposed to be for public airing or published, whatever she said. And then she said she didn't feel it was a threat. Now, you got 2 people who write for Las Vegas media outlets, and that wasn't newsworthy to them. That they felt the community did not need to hear that Judge Tobiasson admitted that she gave me the interview, that the prosecuting officer said, well, you threatened Shane Valentine through his attorney. That was completely filtered out with no mention in either one of those stories. And this is what goes on. And further, on this Dana Gentry from the Nevada Current, and I said this yesterday or the day before in a podcast, she had the nerve to lie to the Las Vegas public in an article in September of 2020 about Judge Tobiasson's, the comment that, I mean, you know, I talk about this and I just go completely crazy because she writes stuff and it goes out to the Las Vegas community. They see what she writes in her blog on the Nevada Current. They see what the Las Vegas Journal writes. And this is what the community see because this is what they want them to see. They don't print the whole truth. They print what they want to print. And the television news beat out here, I just don't freaking get it. I know they called you up yesterday in Channel 13, and they did. Channel 13 segment was very well done. They brought up the judge. They brought up the connection to the murders. That's what they were, some of the charges are, and it was good. But they're doing it now. When I've been reporting on this as an independent investigative journalist for over 2 years, and it's so disheartening, Connie, because I'm not going to get into the Vegas media. They are what they are, but this is about your family and the Kauffman family, and I wish they would talk to me. They have an open mic anytime they want. They could say whatever they want on my podcast. They want to come on podcast and cuss 20 ways to Sunday because of what happened to their son, their brother, their nephew. They can do that, okay? But I'm just I just can't freaking understand this. And there's so much other stuff went on, and I'm not going to go into a dissertation. People can get on and listen to my podcast. They're free on YouTube. They can go to the Baltimore Post-Examiner and look at the articles. But, the stuff that happened in this case with the murders, it's unbelievable. Shane Valentine, one of the suspects at the time of the murders, 2 weeks before, shoots into the house on Neil Kauffman's mother's house. And the police leave the bullet in. They don't take the bullet out. Then the murders happen about 2 weeks later. And then they leave evidence at the crime scene at Sydney's apartment where her and Neil were killed, that your husband, a Clark County firefighter, had a fine to turn it over to the detectives. Unheard of, leaving evidence at a crime scene. A detective working the case tells you he's never seen anything like it. Basically, the case was botched from the start. So many things happen. It's well documented. They go on a crime program in 2018, and they talk about so many people were in the house, and the DNA evidence is basically useless. So many people were in there. They show, photographs of your daughter's body. On an unsolved murder, they're talking about the suspect. They're talking about Shane Valentine. I've never seen, what people tell me, Connie, for 2 years, and they're right, because I feel the same way. They've never seen anything like this in their life. I spent almost 18 years in police work as a criminal investigator. I spent over 20 years in the casino industry as an investigator and a director. I was in the military police. I've never seen a case like this in my life. Allegations against the police, complete police negligence, incompetence, possible cover-up and corruption surrounding this case. One of the lead detectives on the case, his daughter had a personal relationship at some time prior to the murders with the head suspect in this case originally, Shane Valentine. He stayed on the case and apparently didn't tell anybody. I've never seen like this in my life. But I want to get back to the judge. I mean, she's going to be off the bench in a couple of days. It's May 4th tonight when I'm talking to you. It's effective May 7th. And, she escaped accountability. The community has no transparency because there is no hearing. There's going to be no police detectives subpoenaed at this hearing, at least, where we can find out who's telling the truth here. Because the gap we have right now in this thing is that she said, not only to me in her recording, she said in her lawsuit and in other documents her attorneys filed with the Supreme Court of Nevada, with the commission, Answers Commission, that she received confidential information about your daughter and Neo's murders from Detective Jared Grimmett, Detective Gregory Flores, and Detective William Van Cleef. She elaborates on what she got. Cell phone records, communications, details about the cell phone records, details about what witnesses talked to the homicide detective about. She says they talked to her about evidence that was found at the crime scene. Now, this is what Judge Tobiasson alleges. So with this hearing that is never going to happen on May 17th, the commission, as far as I know, was going to subpoena all these police officers to get their testimony, probably to see what they were going to say. Okay? What we have right now is an unresolved situation. We have a sitting judge, right now she's still a sitting judge, who made, in court documents and her own voice, accusations that police detectives in an unsolved murder turned over to her confidential details. When her and her daughter had a prior involvement with Shane Valentine, one of the suspects in the double murders, prior to the murders. But she still obtained that information from the police. That is, I can't even say, as a former criminal investigator, how can I even fathom that? But that's what she said, okay? We've never heard from the police. We were probably going to hear from them on May 17th when they took the stand under oath, but now that is not going to happen. So now we have this gap. Go ahead.
They were never gonna let this go to the hearing. Are you kidding? Are you kidding? Sheriff Lombardo, in the transcripts, in the court documents, he admitted that they never followed up on the information that the judge was providing, looking into Top Notch and whatever she gave them. They never followed up on it. And as a result, a murder happened. Well, they didn't follow up on that information. They didn't follow up on the information that Shane Valentine, the police already confirmed that. The FBI agent said that he had spoken to Melanie 5 to 7 times. Well, they know in the pen registry that he had spoken to her over 200 and 250 times, whatever the number was.
Okay, stop there, because people listening to this, and they may not have listened to all my other podcasts that I covered this. And what Connie is talking about, when the investigator for the Judicial Commission, his name was Adam Wignansky, he's a former homicide detective from Reno, Nevada. He's a private investigator. He worked for Spencer Investigations. That was a firm that was hired by the state, by the commission, to do the investigation on this. And in his investigation, because some of this was, I got a hold of the public records on some of this, and I reported this in multiple podcasts, is that when he interviewed FBI Special Agent Kevin White, who Judge Tobiasson told me in my interview she was providing him information about corruption. Well, Adam Wignansky interviewed Special Agent Kevin White of the Las Vegas Field Office. And I published this in a podcast back, and I think it was titled "Why Did the FBI Agent Lie?" And he told Adam Wignansky, when Adam asked him how much contact did he have with the judge back in 2017, he said, and I'm just taking this out of context at the top of my head, but it's basically what he said, is minimal, maybe 5, 6, 7 times. It was something like that. That's what an FBI agent told a state investigator who was investigating for the commission. Minimal. Few times. When Adam Wignansky got a hold of Judge Tobiasson's cell phone records, her telephone records, there was over 200 contacts with the FBI. So the question we have that's never been answered, well, it's not going to be answered unless something happens, because nobody's going to tell us. The FBI is not going to say it. Judge Tobiasson is not talking. Here's the question I have as a former criminal investigator. Why would an FBI agent lie about his contacts with a sitting judge? Okay, I can think of 2 reasons, and there may be more, as a former criminal investigator. One, that maybe she is a witness in a still ongoing corruption probe, because they were investigating police corruption, the FBI. Okay, maybe that's possible. Maybe it's still going on. And he was trying to minimize, to protect the judge, her contact with the FBI. You know, it may be a far stretch to think that, but that's a possibility that I have in my notes. The other possibility is that maybe there was some personal relationship going on between Judge Tobiasson and this FBI agent, and he's minimizing that, because what people don't know is that when Adam Wignansky interviewed White, it was a telephonic interview. Sitting next to, in other words, Adam did not do this in person. It was through phone call, a conference call. The person who was sitting next to Kevin White in the FBI office while he was being interviewed by Adam over the phone was a guy by the name of Lance Turner. Lance Turner is the general counsel for the Las Vegas division of the FBI. So he was sitting with Kevin White, and because there's no video, because it was just an audio conference, it wasn't a video conference, it wasn't on Zoom, as far as I know, we don't know what was going on, what notes were being passed before, back and forth between Turner, the attorney, and the FBI agent White. But my point being is this: why would an FBI agent lie to an investigator for the commission to minimize Judge Tobiasson's contact with the FBI? We don't know. Though I gave you two possible reasons why, and there may be more. Maybe people have more. I don't know. But that is very puzzling and it's very bizarre. So, but anyway, go on. I just wanted to get that in there because when you bring some stuff up, people don't know sometimes what you're talking about if they haven't been following all my work. Go ahead, Connie. Sorry to do that.
Sorry about that. No, so you have an FBI agent that lies. You've got Sheriff Lombardo who admits that the vice detectives didn't follow up and they dropped the ball in the investigations and didn't follow up on the information that was being provided to them. And as a result, a homicide happens. There is absolutely no way the commission was ever going to go to a hearing. The commission would have had to have interviewed all of the FBI agents, the vice detectives, criminal intelligence, homicide, and anybody else that was involved in this case,
Okay.
any name that was ever mentioned.
Okay, let me stop you there for a second so people know. Based on my investigation that I've talked about in podcasts going back, we're podcast 47, I guess this will be podcast 48 coming back. I obtained some of the public records, the documents that were given to the Supreme Court on Adam Wignansky's investigation. He was the investigator that investigated this stuff. And I said this in one of the podcasts, the people he spoke to, they turned over, as far as I know, and as far as what the court records say, so people understand this, Adam Wignansky's, the commission's investigative file, according to Supreme Court records, was all turned over to Judge Tobiasson. When the commission filed those papers with the Supreme Court, they did not truncate enough. It was blacked out with marker on who they talked to. I raised the people they talked to. Otherwise, I raised the truncation so I could see who it was. And the commission's investigator interviewed FBI Special Agent Kevin White of the Las Vegas FBI Division, FBI Special Agent Richard Smith from the FBI Las Vegas Division, and FBI Special Agent Vinita Pandey from the Las Vegas FBI Division. He interviewed those, and I talked about some of their statements of what we got, because some of it was missing. Some of it was truncated. Pages were missing, but what was made public, I talked about what he told them. He also interviewed Las Vegas Metro criminal intelligence detective Michael Wilson and Michael Wilson's supervisor, Joseph Herring, of the criminal division. He interviewed then vice detective, well, I don't know if he was a vice detective when Adam won, but he was a vice detective in the past, Gregory Flores. He interviewed then, who was a vice detective, then went to homicide, Justine Gaddis. He interviewed Jared Grimmett, Metro homicide detective working on your daughter's murder. He interviewed Metro homicide detective Mitchell Dosh, the other detective that was working on the unsolved murders, and some other police officers are mentioned in there. And then there's a bunch of civilians that he talked to. We know he talked to you. He wanted to talk to me. I published my interview with him. It was being recorded. I told him I was recording, and I published that in a podcast. There's no big secrets. I wasn't telling him anything super secret. And then he interviewed some other people that I had done interviews to also prior to the Judicial Commission starting their investigation. But the point is, they did for I could say, a very thorough investigation on talking to many people to find out just exactly what the hell's going on. But I just want to raise that issue. And one thing I want to say so people understand, when Connie's talking about the judge, okay, the judge told me in the interview that she was providing information to vice detectives about this unlicensed club, Top Notch, okay? That was the place where listen to this, people, I said this in a previous podcast, and obviously this isn't news to the Las Vegas media because they don't think it's newsworthy for the public to know this. But Judge Tobiasson was a sitting judge in 2015, and I raised this at a podcast the other day, 2 podcasts. She allowed her minor daughter, Sarah, at the time in 2015, to associate and be in the company of the pimps who were running this unlicensed club that she said was a center for prostitution. And also there were underage girls from high schools out in Las Vegas in this underage club. She allowed her daughter and permitted her daughter to frequent that club and then work in the club. The same club that she was giving information to the vice detectives allegedly about. So she committed a crime. In the state of Nevada, it is a crime for a parent or guardian to allow their minor children to be in the company of criminals. So when I say she broke the law, that's what I'm referring to. She broke the law in 2015. Okay. Now, she says she was giving them information. They didn't follow up on it. And when it moved to a different location out of Chinatown, Top Notch, there ended up being a murder there. So people understand this. Shane Valentine, who was, the judge talked about him a lot, a pimp who was recruiting girls, attempted to recruit her daughter into prostitution, he had nothing to do with the murder at Top Notch. That murder was solved by Metro Homicide, and it was another person. That person's in jail. But Connie's right when she says they didn't follow up on the information to close down this unlicensed club, which is now closed, Top Notch, at the time, going back to 2015, 2016. The murder was in September 2016. And the question is they didn't follow up on anything. Obviously, she was telling about Shane Valentine, if she's telling the truth, okay? If she's telling the truth. And then after Top Notch murder, a month later, in October 2016, we have the murder of your daughter, Nehemiah Kauffman, when they're both shot in the head, and that remains unsolved. So you're right when you say that if what Judge Tobiasson said is the truth, and we know it's somewhat true, because I reported on this, Clark County Sheriff Joe Lombardo admitted to Adam Wignansky, the judicial investigator, he also interviewed Lombardo. And Lombardo said, yeah, he was pissed. At least is what he says to the investigator, because when he found out that they didn't follow up on the information, he said, a judge gave you valid information and you didn't follow up on it, and now we have a murder. He's talking about the murder in September of 2016 at Top Notch. Now, when I talk about this, people, there's nothing on my screen. This is coming off the top of my head. So on everything that I've done, that's why I can talk like this. I don't have any notes in front of me. The point being is this. They didn't follow up on what Tobiasson was telling them about Valentine, okay? And they had the murder Top Notch, and Lombardo, the sheriff said, who runs the LVMPD, the Las Vegas Metro Police Department, he said that murder happened because, you guys didn't follow up on it. If the place was shut down earlier and it would have been closed, maybe it wouldn't have been no murder. So that's where that's coming from. But then the month later, in October of 2016, we have the murder of your daughter and Nehemiah Kauffman, and Shane Valentine was a suspect at the time, and as far as I'm concerned, he's still a suspect, regardless of what the police say. Every year they keep changing it. And also, Frankie Zappia is a suspect in those murders, who's the stepdaughter of another Las Vegas Metro police officer, and her pimp at the time, Dominique Thompson, goes by the street name of Damo. Those were the three suspects in the murders. So you have a lot of cops' kids surrounding this murder. Not to say, it's just, as an investigator, I got to look at this. Are the police covering something up because these cops' kids are surrounding this murder? You got to remember, Frankie Zappia is a suspect. They did a search warrant on her apartment when they did the search warrant on Dominique Thompson 6 months later after the murders in April of 2018. Okay? She's a suspect. Okay? That's why Dominique Thompson went to federal prison, because they found he's a convicted felon. They found the gun in his apartment. They turned it over to the feds, and he's out of prison now, but he went to prison for about a year. So they were suspects, because you don't do search warrants on people unless they're suspects for something. So if we know they were suspects because they were looking for a gun, most likely used in the homicide, which I'm assuming they didn't get because nobody's been charged. And then every year, Shane Valentine changes. First, he was a suspect in 2016. Then in 2017, the first homicide lieutenant says, I just want to make it clear, he's no longer a suspect person of interest. A year later, the new homicide detective said, oh no, he's still a suspect person of interest. Sheriff Lombardo told the Judicial Commission investigator in 2019, Shane Valentine is still a suspect in the murders. And then last year, when I spoke to Larry Hatfield from the Public Information Office at Metro, he told me, well, Shane Valentine is not a person of interest or suspect. Well, I want to know this, okay? After the murders of your daughter, Nehemiah Kauffman, Shane Valentine I'm saying he left fast. He drove to California, and that's where he was arrested, okay? He shut his phone off, got a new phone number, put it out. I obtained those grand jury records that prove that, and I did that in a story for the Baltimore Post-Examiner, and I've showed it in my podcast. If they cleared him, and they're not going to tell us anything, and they don't have to tell us anything, but as a criminal investor, I got to say, how did they clear this guy? Because why did he flee to California right after the murders? That is an open question in my notes. So to me, until I find something out, he is a suspect. Frankie Zappia, stepdaughter of retired Las Vegas Metro Police Officer Daniel Gersdorf. His nickname is Daniel Gersdorf. Okay? His stepdaughter is a suspect in the murders. According to Judge Tobiasson, Allie Bowden, the daughter of another Las Vegas Metro Police Officer, Clarence Bowden, goes by the name of Ty. According to Judge Tobiasson, Allie is Sarah's best friend. According to Judge Tobiasson, Allie was a prostitute for Shane Valentine who switched over to Nehemiah Kauffman right before the murders. And we have Sarah Tobiasson, Allie's best friend, whose mother is Judge Tobiasson, whose husband is a retired Metro Sergeant, Murray Tobiasson. They call him Todd. So we have cops' kids surround this murder. It's very troubling to me to be as an investigator. Is there some reason why Metro will not solve this case? Because this case should have been solved within 2 weeks. And then on top of that, you found out last year that, and you talked to Metro about it, is that Jared Grimmett, one of the lead detectives on the homicide, his daughter, people, believe it or not, had a personal relationship of some kind that we don't know with Shane Valentine sometime prior to the murders. I don't care if it was 6 months, 2 years, 3 years, or they were in the cribs together when they were born. He should never, ever have been investigating this case. He should have went to his supervisor immediately and said, I have a conflict. My daughter once dated or had a personal relationship, whatever she was doing with Valentine, I have to be off the case. He did not do that. And you know that because you told Homicide about it, and they said, well, it was not a big deal. It is a big deal. You know why, Connie? Because I spoke to former homicide commanders from major police departments that said that is the biggest disgrace for the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, that a homicide detective was investigating a double homicide in which one of the suspects at the time of those homicides once dated his daughter. That's another notch that something else is wrong with this case. It's just one thing after another.
Well,
okay?
let's not forget Greg Flores, who is the sponsor for Frankie and has known her entire life. He was the vice detective that allegedly issued the search warrant and went on the search warrant of his goddaughter's. He's involved in it.
There's a no alleged. Okay, I found out from sources. Okay, people, what are we talking about here? After the murders, like I said, in April, the murders occurred in October. The bodies were found in the afternoon of October 27, 2016. About 6 months after the murders. It took the police 6 months to figure this out, when everybody was saying who the suspects were right after the murders. But 6 months later, in April, I believe it was April or May of, and I got to look at my notes, I don't have the notes here, of 2018, homicide detective Mitchell Dosh, okay, contacts Vice to do a search warrant at Frankie Zappia's apartment and Dominique Thompson's apartment. They live in both locations. She was living in a high-dollar condo because she's a prostitute working for Dominique Thompson, because obviously he was looking for the gun that may have been used in the homicide. So he asks Vice for help. And my understanding is Vice didn't want to get involved in this, okay? Long story short, people, is Vice executes the search warrants at Frankie Zappia's apartment at Turnberry Towers out here, which is a high-dollar condo towers. There are 3 or 4 towers down there on Paradise. And they also execute search warrants at some of Dominique Thompson's residence and some of his cars. And that's where they got the gun from him. But here's the point being. The Vice detective who executed those search warrants on the information that I received was then Vice Detective Gregory Flores. The problem with that is, according to when I talked to Frankie's sister, she told me and some other people that Greg Flores was a family friend of her father, and growing up, he was always over the house. Right there's another conflict. He should never have done that search warrant, but he did do the search warrant. So that's another thing that goes up to me is, that shouldn't have happened either. Too many crazy things happened that no professional, I'm going to say, no professional police department would allow even stuff like this to happen. Now, I can't say that the supervisors knew about it at the time. His involvement, Greg Flores' involvement with the Giersdorf family, the Zappia family and stuff, but it doesn't make a difference because he also should have said, wait a minute, I can't be involved in this. I can't even be the affiant on the search warrant because I know Frankie Zappia, I know her father, okay? But he didn't. According to the information I got, he was the one who executed the search warrant on Dominic Thompson's and Frankie Zappia's place. So you're right when you say that. It's one thing after another that occurred. But
well, I went to Internal Affairs twice about that, Greg Flores and Detective Grimmett and his involvement and everything that was going on. And Internal Affairs, the first time said that there was no wrongdoing, that neither one of them did anything wrong. But it only took them about 48 hours to respond back on that one. And the second time, the sergeant never even bothered to call me back. So that's what I got from Internal Affairs, trying to play by the rules and doing the right thing and holding these cops accountable. Internal Affairs didn't do a thing. They are sweeping this. They are sweeping all of this under the rug. This commission hearing, they wanted to make this go away, just like everything else that's happened in this case. They want to make it go away because they failed in this investigation. They failed. My daughter, this case was damaged. I've said it from the beginning. This case was ruined before they were even shot because of how the police were handling these investigations or their lack thereof, or the lack thereof. And so do you honestly think that two-bit sheriff Joe Lombardo, most pathetic sheriff along a long list of other pathetic sheriffs, was going to let this come to light? They keep those secrets buried deep. They would never let this go to the commission hearing. They will never let this get out there. They are going to bury this as far as they can, because the minute this came out and it proved that they were negligent and these homicides happened because the police didn't do their job, do you know the lawsuit? Do you know the ramifications of the truth coming out? Are you kidding?
listen,
It's a major cover-up. It's a complete major cover-up.
Okay. Let me inject something here. You're absolutely right. I don't know why, and because I don't have inside information from the commission, regardless of what her dirtbag attorneys put in a couple of papers that the commission was leaking information to me. The Judicial Commission never leaked jack shit to me. Okay, I have emails going back and forth to them asking for documents and stuff, and they said we can't give you anything because it's an ongoing case. Well, they never gave me nothing. Stuff that I got from other sources, not from the commission. But let me explain something to you, so the people know here. I'm gonna say a phrase here. It's called the Brotherhood of Lies. Okay, and let me explain the Brotherhood of Lies. It's when cops lie to protect each other. They lie to protect other detectives. Detectives lie for other detectives. Police officers lie for other police officers. Not every cop, not every detective, but that goes on not only in Las Vegas Metro, it goes on in every law enforcement agency in this country. And you could actually see, if you watch the news every week, there's more and more stuff. It's been going on for decades. It's called the Brotherhood of Lies. No detective is going to say something that's going to implicate another detective, even in this case, in wrongdoing. They all have to keep their mouth shut. And I'm going to say something else, too. For these detectives that, in my opinion, if they didn't do anything wrong, they have no fucking balls. Because, and I'm going to say that for a reason. 30 years ago, and I'll be talking about this in future podcasts, okay? I lost my job, 12-year police career, because I got a guy who was wrongfully convicted out of jail because the police and the prosecutor withheld exculpatory evidence, okay? I went through almost a year of hell, and I lost a 12-year police career, could never get back on a police department because I broke the so-called blue wall of silence. But this is what goes on, okay? It goes on all the time. But why I said the comment about these cops that have no balls out here, because I'm going to tell you, when I went through the stuff 30 years ago, we didn't have a union. We couldn't belong to a union under Nevada law because we were deputy sheriffs. We handle everything like Metro does. We handle the police, the courts, the process, but it was the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office. But because we were deputy sheriffs and the sheriff was a constitutional elected official, we couldn't belong to a collective bargaining unit. We had no union, okay? We weren't protected by a civil service commission because we didn't have civil service. So basically, I got screwed, and they could do nothing to the sheriff, although I tried, because the court said he's a constitutional officer. He can hire and fire anybody he wants. You were wrongfully terminated, basically, but we can't force the sheriff to put you back to work. So that's where that went. But what I'm saying over here is the fact is these cops who Judge Tobiasson made allegations against to me on the record, and I published that. And she says it in court documents also and in her lawsuit, okay? She's basically saying these guys are no good because they should never have turned any information over to her. And she told you, and I published those emails, that the cops investigating your daughter's murder, that they're all corrupt assholes. She talked about how, and I'm not going to mention this guy's name because I kind of feel bad for him, okay? Detective Mitchell Dorsch, one of the homicide guys, okay? That he sucks. He sucks at his job. That's what she said. Well, if she knows that, and he does suck at his job, and I've heard cops talk about him and said, no, he doesn't suck at his job, that could have only come from another cop who told something to Judge Tobiasson. My point being is this, okay? She made allegations to me, and I published that when I did stories on it, and I strained it out later on, that basically insinuating that Detective Mitchell Dorsch from Las Vegas Metro Homicide is corrupt. Well, I said this in a story, and I said this in a podcast back. I talked to a lot of cops for years, even on this thing, going back a couple of years on this thing. And nobody said, Mitchell Dorsch is not corrupt. There's been no allegations, and I don't believe he's corrupt. I don't think he did anything corrupt, okay? But she made those allegations. What I can't figure out is this, okay? I would say, why doesn't he and these other detectives hold a public press conference or just get a hold of an attorney and say, I want to set the record straight? Judge Tobiasson says it's not true. But what happens is the union out here, the Police Protective Association, most likely tells these cops to keep your mouth shut. Well, I'm going to say something, both to the union and both to the police department. If a sitting judge is making allegations about me, insinuations that I'm corrupt, fuck the police department's rules and fuck the goddamn union. If they're not going to back me up, I'm going to say it myself. And not a damn thing is going to happen to me. And I say that because I talk the talk because I walk the walk. When I went after the sheriff and the sheriff's office, the police department, that's what it was 30 years ago, I didn't have a union. I had nobody standing next to me, okay? I did what I had to do because I knew I was telling the truth and they were covering it up. But these guys out here have a freaking union. They have attorneys for the union. And why they would not come out and say, listen, I want to make the statement. Judge Tobiasson made this allegation against me, and it's not freaking true. But they don't talk. They just stay in their little ball, their little balloon, and everybody keeps their mouth shut. Now, Connie, now I'm on a rant, okay? Now I want to say something. You brought up Sheriff Lombardo. In multiple stories that I wrote, going back even to the Las Vegas Massacre, I wrote 135 stories on the Las Vegas Massacre, October 1st Massacre, more than any other investigative journalist in the country. That is a fact that were published by the Baltimore Post-Examiner. And I criticized and talked about Sheriff Lombardo, and I do it on my podcast. And I've said this consistently, and I will say it again here. Sheriff Joe Lombardo, who runs the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, is corrupt, incompetent, and a documented liar. And I say that because I backed it up in my stories and in my podcast. Now, I want to bring up something, being that you got me going here. After the Las Vegas Massacre occurred, I think it was November 2nd, and I wrote a story about this. Sheriff Joe Lombardo was interviewed by George Knapp from KLAS-TV Las Vegas, 8 News Now, what they call the I-Team, the investigative team. He sat 3 feet away. It was filmed. It was published from Lombardo asking a litany of questions about the massacre. Sheriff Lombardo lied to the public and lied to George Knapp. And George Knapp didn't challenge him either because he was unfamiliar with the events of the massacre, which he shouldn't have been if he was interviewing the sheriff about the massacre, or he was protecting the sheriff, as they do all the time in the media, protect the sheriff and other sheriffs out in Las Vegas, because Sheriff Lombardo said at that, I think it was November 2nd, 2017, it was televised. People can go on the internet and see that. When Sheriff Lombardo said, we wanted to get into that room immediately because we didn't want Paddock to open fire or reload. That was excuse my language, people, I won't say it, a freaking lie. And George Knapp had to know that because nobody entered Paddock's room for over an hour. Even when there were multiple police officers during that hour period outside his room. So when George Knapp questioned Lombardo, and Lombardo made that statement, if I was sitting 3 feet away from this lying POS sheriff, when he said that, when 58 people were murdered and over 500 people were damn wounded by Paddock's gunfire, and the sheriff of Clark County, the head of the police department, goes on television and tells the public in front of a journalist, we wanted to get in the room as soon as we can because we didn't want him reloading, or firing again. That was a freaking lie. And George Knapp let it stand. That's what goes on out here in Las Vegas. And one thing after another with Lombardo, with all these television stations after the massacre, when they talked to him, nobody pressed him on the stuff they should have pressed him on. It was all, oh, Sheriff, we're so happy to have you as a sheriff. Oh, Sheriff, you did so good at this, okay? Sheriff Lombardo is incompetent, he's a liar, and he's corrupt. And I'm going to tell you why I think he's, for many reasons, why he's corrupt. Because years ago, real story short, we're into an hour, and I don't want this thing going any further, okay? What sheriff, what police chief would hire lawyers to prevent the testimony of a former corrupt cop from testifying in court because they felt that this former corrupt cop would or may implicate other cops, even ones they didn't know about. So he hires a law firm, Lombardo, to represent the police department. This is in court records. This is documented. As a matter of fact, George Knapp from the I-Team was in that courtroom, and he even wrote an article, and to his credit, he did say he's never seen anything like this before. Okay? Why would a police chief or a sheriff, anybody running a law enforcement agency, would hire a law firm to try to prevent the testimony of a former corrupt cop to go on the stand because they were afraid he was going to implicate other cops? Okay? Clark County District Attorney Steve Wilson knew this was going on. Sheriff Lombardo is the one who hired the law firm. That's why I say Clark County District Attorney Steve Wilson is corrupt, and so is Clark County Sheriff Joe Lombardo. He's corrupt because what they did is to cover up damage. It was damage control for the police department. We do not need to hear any more of this. The public can do. And that's what they do. And while I'm on that subject, Connie, since you got me going, you got to excuse me, okay? The undersheriff at the time, Kevin McMahill, he was Lombardo's undersheriff during the massacre. Okay, he retired earlier this year. He's now making 6 figures work for some private company like these guys do. Okay, Fox 5, Fox Nation, which I was totally surprised at this, and I wrote a story on this for the Baltimore Post-Examiner. Fox 5 interviewed Undersheriff Kevin McMahill when they did their documentary about, and I don't remember what the title was of the documentary, but it was like an hour long. They interviewed Kevin McMahill. And in that documentary, Kevin McMahill, a freaking liar, the number 2 guy at the time at the LVMPD under Sheriff Lombardo, his right-hand man, said on Fox Nation documentary that when they breached the door in the hallway, the gunshots stopped. He's talking about the massacre. That's what he said, okay? That when the team that was in the hall an hour later, when they were in the hall, that when they breached the door to the hallway to get from the hallway to get into the 32nd floor, that's when the gunfire stopped. He lied to the public, and Fox Nation, Fox allowed him to get away with that, and I even wrote them and said, that is a freaking lie. They lie for one reason, okay? To protect the image of the police department, and in doing so, they sacrifice the truth because they have to protect the image of the department, okay? The gunshots, people, listen to what I'm saying. You can go back on Fox Nation and listen to that documentary. The gunshots did not stop an hour and 5 minutes when they were in the hallway breaching the door. The gunshots stopped about 10:16, an hour before. But Kevin McMahill, a liar, the then undersheriff, got on television that the whole world saw this documentary and made the department look good by saying, when they were in the hall and they breached the door, the gunshot stopped. That was a freaking lie. The gunshot stopped an hour and 5 minutes before that. So either Kevin McMahill did not know what he was talking about, and if he didn't, he shouldn't have been undersheriff, or he's a liar. It is my opinion, and I'll say this again, that then undersheriff Kevin McMahill lied on national television to protect the image of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department because he sacrificed the truth. And I wrote multiple, I don't know how many times I wrote to Fox News, and I was interviewed by Fox News on Tucker Carlson after the massacre. And I wrote to Fox and I said, listen, he's lied to you. That's not true. Thinking maybe they would do an addition or something or change it. And they never did nothing. What I'm saying there is this: the Brotherhood of Lies. Police lie to protect their brothers. Sheriffs and police chiefs will lie and sacrifice the truth to protect the image of their department. And Sheriff Joe Lombardo and then Undersheriff Kevin McMahill did exactly that. That's why I say Sheriff Lombardo said a couple of weeks ago, because his second term is up next year, that he's thinking about running for governor of the state of Nevada. Okay? I don't like politics. As far as I'm concerned, all politicians are corrupt in one form or another. But I'm saying this right now. If corrupt, lying, incompetent Sheriff Joe Lombardo announces next year that he's running for governor, he's going to have to contend with me, because the ballless, weak Las Vegas media will never, ever do anything against Joe Lombardo, because they are nothing more than public relations firms for the casino industry and the sheriffs. Not only this sheriff. Sheriff before him, Gillespie. Sheriff before him, Bill Young. Sheriff before him, Jerry Keller. They protect the police department. And a matter of fact, Connie, and I hate to go on to do this, but we've got an hour and 2 minutes here. I'll say one last thing. I was told there was well, let me put it this way. Fox 5 Las Vegas, okay, tells their people, from what I was told, they are not to investigate any story that's going to make the police department look bad. That was confirmed by me, who's somebody who works at Fox 5. So this is what they do. Then you got this woman, reporter, female, who works for News 3. She's their chief reporter on crime. Her husband is a retired Metro cop. And believe it or not, people, this reporter got an award years ago from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department for being the best police reporter in town. So do you really think that News 3, this reporter, is going to criticize the police department or do investigations that are critical of the police department when she is married to a former Metro cop and got an award, which is unheard of to me? I don't know. I've never heard of that. Is that what police departments do across the country? Give awards to journalists? No, they did it out here because that is their go-to person when they need a story to be covered up. That's what they do, okay? That's a conflict of interest as far as I'm concerned. But I'm just bringing this up because I'm telling you, in the over 3 years, May 18th will be 3 years since I first interviewed Judge Tobiasson. And another thing, I've supported Judge Tobiasson on many things. And I've also reported when my investigation shows she screwed up and she lied. But she told the truth about some stuff. As much as I can't stand her personally, I take my personal opinion and I put it on the shelf. I'm the one that broke the story that she was outed and confirmed when Metro Homicide Detective Mitchell Dorr said that she was outed by Vice. I'm the one that broke the story. I broke other stories. I kind of confirmed some of the stuff that she said. But Judge Tobiasson did so many things wrong. She's a documented liar, and she has no business, and she will not be a judge in a couple of days, and that's good for the community, because judges cannot lie. And then you take everything that she said about your daughter and Neil Kauffman's murders, and she hasn't answered for that, and neither have the police. Okay, we're at 1 hour and 4 minutes. I'm going to let you close, say whatever you want to say. Take it, Connie Land.
If the judge has any decency, she needs to explain why she said it was her and her daughter that were supposed to be killed and not Sydney. If she has the evidence that she says she has and the documentation, and I know she called Grimmett when I was with her. We were at California Pizza Kitchen in Summerlin. It was in July of 2017 when she called him. So I know she was in communication with him. You know, if she's got that evidence, then she can give it to us. Let us fight to bring justice. And, you know, I don't talk a lot about Nehemiah or his family because that's their responsibility. But everything that I do, Doug, is I'm fighting for the truth. I'm fighting for Sydney. I'm fighting for the Kauffman family. I'm not just fighting for Sid. I'm fighting for both of these kids. And so it's not one-sided. And, you know, both families are still suffering. We continue to suffer. You know, she gets to skate and walk away. We get a life sentence. We got a life sentence. My kids, when I'm gone, my kids will continue on with their sister that was killed. I mean, we'll never escape this. We will always fight this. So if she has information, she can come forward and bring it in. Talking about Lombardo, talking about Wolfson. You know, they want to solve this case, then do a grand jury. Do what you need to solve this case. But they really don't. They really don't.
Connie,
it's infuriating to me.
I said this in a podcast way back, okay? And it's not going to happen because it is my belief that Clark County District Attorney is just as corrupt as Sheriff Lombardo. Because if he wasn't, there would already have been a special grand jury investigating these murders. And what they do, and they won't do it, is you pull everybody you think has information about the murders. And I have a list that's pages and pages long that I could give them. Okay? And you get the testimony down under oath. Because depending on who they are, if you give somebody immunity from something, at least the way it worked in Virginia and other states, if they fail to answer questions or lie to the grand jury, they sit in jail until they answer. So you subpoena everybody. The judge, the daughters of these cops, Sydney and Neo's friends. You get everybody there that you think has information on the murder, that I know has information on the murder. Because this murder investigation should have been closed within 2 weeks. I firmly believe this, okay? And maybe I'll look like an idiot somewhere down the road if this case is ever solved before I die, okay? I believe that the Las Vegas Metro Homicide Division knows who committed these murders. And why nobody has been arrested and or indicted for these murders 4.5 years later is extremely freaking troubling. When you have all these parameters around this investigation, too many cops' kids, allegations of police corruption, allegations of a cover-up, allegations that evidence was destroyed, allegations that the wrong two people were killed, allegations that a sitting judge was outed by the police as a confidential source of information to a police officer and his daughter, who was a prostitute according to the judge. I can go on and on with this for hours, but I've done this in multiple podcasts and in 30 stories that I wrote for the Baltimore Post-Examiner. This case stinks. And I could say this right now. I want to close out. I'll give you the last word here in a second. United States Attorney Merrick Garland, if you are listening to me, this is an open request for you to come out, your Justice Department, and come out here and find out just what the hell's been going on out in Las Vegas. As far as I know, we don't have a standing U.S. attorney right now. Nicholas Trutanich, resigned because the new president comes in and they want them on to put their own people. And I don't think anybody's been appointed. We have an associate right now that's handling the case. But we need to find out just what the hell's going on. We need to find out why an FBI agent lied to a state investigator about a sitting judge's contact with the FBI. Okay? We need to find out why a 12-year criminal enterprise run by a pimp called Morley Mall, real name Jamal Rashid. When the FBI investigated him back in 2014 and raided his house, and then in 2020, he's given a sweetheart deal of one single count of running an illegal business for the purpose of prostitution. He hasn't even been sentenced yet. His sentencing has been continued. He's supposed to be sentenced here in another day or two again. We don't know if it's going to be continued. And everybody's saying he's going to get nothing, maybe get 30 days in jail or something like that. How do you run a 12-year continuing criminal enterprise in prostitution when Nicholas Trutanich didn't even go to a grand jury last year? They gave him a pre-indictment plea deal, which was, before we go to the grand jury, take this deal. It was done by a complaint to the U.S. attorney, a criminal complaint. They can do that, okay? And then what was the disgrace, when they came out, and I did stories on this, they said he was transporting women across the states. They even identified, not by name, but they said, woman number 1 went from Vegas to Hawaii. Woman number 2 went from here to New York. Woman number 3 went from here to San Francisco. One here went this, that one. They knew this guy was doing this, yet how does he end up with a sweetheart deal? How does a 5-year plus FBI investigation with the Las Vegas division, in conjunction with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Nevada and Las Vegas, end up with this guy getting a bullshit sweetheart deal? Is basically what it was. I don't know what happened, but it's screwed up. We need an investigation of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department and the Las Vegas FBI division to find out just what the hell's been going on out here. Because Judge Tobiasson told you before I go that the FBI was investigating your daughter's death. Now, she basically lied about that in papers to the commission. That I don't know where Connie Land would have got that from, but your text messages between you and Judge Tobiasson confirm that, including the one that I'll put up on the screenshots when I do this podcast, where she tells you and you say, hey, basically she's talking about the FBI. Will they investigate Sidney's death? And her response to you is, because she told you she was talking to an FBI agent she described as her friend, quote, is, your case automatically connects. So when Judge Tobiasson said that she never told you that the FBI was investigating your daughter's death, that's another lie that she did, because she told you right there, your daughter's case automatically connects, meaning connects to the FBI investigation that Kevin White was allegedly conducting with corruption within the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. And just so people know, when Morley Mall was given that sweetheart deal, not one Las Vegas Metro police officer, and the allegations were against them that some of them were taking payoffs by Morley Mall to target rival pimps, nobody's been indicted. Nobody's been charged other than Morley Mall. He got off with that sweetheart pre-indictment plea deal. So that's just something I want to say since you mentioned something. Connie, we're at 1 hour and 12 minutes. I don't want this to get any longer. We can do this again. You got the closing remarks. Go ahead and take it from here.
I think the commission has done a disservice to this community. The judge, if she has information, she has a moral and ethical obligation to give us that information that she has. If she has the evidence that the police have buried, then she needs to come forth with it. The police solved the homicide. You know, Wolfson, do a special grand jury. Solve this case. You guys have kids. If I was important, if I was someone that had money, if we were people of influence, this case would have been solved a long time ago. And they would have pulled out all stops. But we're not. Sidney wasn't important to anyone but us. Nehemiah wasn't important to anyone but the Kauffman family and the people that knew him. So we're not important. But they are important. So I just, just so the police know, they listen to all these podcasts. I know that. I'm never, ever going to stop. Ever stop. And if they thought I was ever going to slow down, I'm never going to slow down. I will continue to fight ruthlessly, relentlessly to find who killed my daughter. And anyone that's involved unethically, shouldn't have been involved in that, did anything wrong in this investigation, I'm going to claw the truth, and I'm going to get to the truth, and I'm going to steamroll over anybody that's kept my daughter from getting her day of justice. Mark my words, on her life, I'm going to do it. That's it.
Okay, Connie. I want to read one more thing, and then I'm going to close this out. Thanks for your remarks. That was Connie Land, whose daughter, Sydney Land, was one of the victims in the still unsolved 2016 Las Vegas Land Kauffman murders. I'm going to read one more thing, Connie, before I go. I published this on my social media before, and I just want to read it into this. Many people have been telling me that I need to talk about my police story, what happened to me 30 years ago. So I will oblige by telling my story in future podcasts. Over a quarter of a century has passed, yet it feels like it was just yesterday. However, my main focus will always be on Judge Melanie Andress-Tobiasson, her meddling into the unsolved 2016 Land Kauffman murders, and how Tobiasson and the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department compromised the integrity of the investigation into the unsolved murders. Tobiasson's resignation, in lieu of facing charges, will not stop my reporting. It means nothing to me. Until the murders are solved, everything is on the table. One more fact. It was my investigative journalism, in part and possibly more so, that resulted in Tobiasson resigning from the bench and stipulating that she could never be a judge in Nevada again. Thanks, Connie, for the interview. We'll talk again, and we'll see what happens in the future. Nothing's over till it's over. Thank you, and have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
I need to make a correction before I end this episode. I incorrectly stated that Fox 5 Las Vegas did the documentary that then Undersheriff Kevin McMahill appeared on. The documentary, titled The Las Vegas Massacre, an investigative look into the deadliest mass shooting in American history, aired on the Fox News Network's Fox Nation on October 1st, 2019. Thanks for listening, folks.